Hey guys, it's Kyle down here at Lunicycle. Today I'm going to show you how to install the Fastace fork onto the Talaria Sting. Alright, so the first step in swapping the fork is to remove your old front wheel. This is the D&M fork, so you want to loosen up this main axle bolt, loosen up all four of your pinch bolts, and remove the axle. Once this bolt is loose, you can help get the axle started. And you should be able to pull the axle right out and set your front wheel aside. After that, you want to remove your caliper. On Talarias, this may be a little bit tight, so use a good tool and be patient. Set the bolts aside. You will have a little zip tie right here on nearly all of the forks. Go ahead and carefully cut this. Next, you want to move up to the handlebars. And I prefer to remove the 4 light bolts first. Go ahead and set the bolts aside. Next, it's time to remove your old stem. Just loosen the 2 pinch bolts. Remove the top cap. And then you should be able to pull your old stem off. On both the Talaria and the SUR RON, there will be a spacer here. Don't lose the spacer. You'll need it when reinstalling your new fork. Now on all the crowns, the upper crowns, you have 2 pinch bolts here and then a third one on the steer tube. Now once you loosen all 3 of these, the fork may just drop out. So you want to go ahead and support the fork right here so you can carefully lower it out of place. So loosen these 2, and then the third one. Now you can carefully remove this upper crown, and now the fork is being fully supported by your hand, and you do want to carefully drop this out. You can let everything dangle for a while. The next step is going to be to transfer over your old crown race and lower bearing. And I'm going to go to the bench to show you how to remove this old one and transfer it to your new fork. Alright, now it's time to transfer over your old crown race and lower bearing. This is going to be the most difficult part of the fork install. Here at Luna, we do have the proper tool for this, but it's very expensive and chances are you're not going to have this tool at home. Most of the forks, in fact all of the forks, do have a tiny slot on the front and the rear to put a flathead screwdriver. Now you don't want to just muscle this off with one push. You will deform this, and I've seen ones that get very deformed, and once you reinstall them they do just kind of straighten back out. But if you're patient and take your time, you will get this off with very little damage. So I'm going to pry it a little bit on the front, then flip it over and go a little bit on the back. And you may need to go back and forth many times before this comes loose. Now if you're installing this on a SUR RON, we do sell a Cane Creek upgraded headset. That'll come with a complete brand new lower crown and complete headset, but it does only fit the SUR RON, does not fit the Talaria. So for Talarias, just be patient and you'll get this off without damaging anything. So you can see we've already got it quite a bit got a fair amount of gap there, then you can kind of use the sides of the fork. And once you get it far enough, it'll just come loose. You can see we've already got it quite a bit. It should come loose any second now. But this is one thing you don't want to rush. Alright. Now on Talarias, there is a few little micro spacers. On SUR RONs, you won't have these little spacers. Just be sure to reuse these. Alright, now you've successfully removed the crown race and the lower bearing. Now it's time to install it on your new fork. Okay, now it's time to install the crown race on your new fork. The first thing you want to do is, if you're doing this on a Talaria, is put the two little spacers on, then your black crown race. Now, here at Luna, there is a professional tool, but we just use a piece of pipe that seems to be the proper diameter. And if you have a piece of pipe that's about the size of this steer tube, that can help you. If you don't have a piece of pipe, I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and insert the bearing and then put any force on the very top edge of this bearing. If you're going to install it the way I show you and you just tap on the black part, you may deform it. It is kind of soft metal. So today I'm going to show you how to do it with a punch or even just a socket. Now before you get it much further than that, it can be helpful to apply a little bit of waterproof grease to this area. This can just help with the install. Now, your goal is to get this seated flat onto this lower crown. And using things you may have in your garage, like a socket, I'm going to place this socket right here and tap it with a hammer. And flip it over. And be sure this gets seated evenly. Once it gets towards the bottom, it is going to get very tight, and you're going to need to tap on this hammer pretty hard to get it seated perfectly. But again, if you're patient, you'll be able to do this without damaging anything. Another great tool is a punch. Now we're getting to the point where I'm going to need to start hitting this a little harder. Alright, and we're almost there. Looks like it's just about flush. I'm going to keep going until I get this perfectly flush. And again, if this ends up taking you 10 minutes, I think it's worth it. Alright, now it looks like I've got this totally flush up against the lower crown. Now it's time to go ahead and install this back on the bike. Alright guys, now it's time to install the fork onto the bike. I did go ahead and apply a little bit of waterproof grease to the bearing. It can help it last longer. I do want to show you, in case everything fell out of your bike, your upper assembly is bearing, a tiny little race which goes on top of the bearing, and then a little dust cover on top of that. So if all that stuff fell on the floor, that's the order that it goes in. Now's your chance to re-grease the top one too. Alright, now when it comes to installing the fork, you want all the wires to go into this area right here of the fork. If you forget to do that, you'll need to take the fork right back off. So carefully insert the steer tube and route all the wires into this area of the fork. And you want to be sure you're not pinching anything in this area. And you want to just go ahead and hold this up just with your hand for now. Get yourself situated up on top. And now it's time to install the upper crown. So once you're sure everything is lined up properly right here, you can go ahead and get this onto the steer tube. You do want to be sure all three of these bolts are very loose. It can really help with the install. And chances are, if this is brand new, you may need to tap this with a hammer just to get it over the two legs. Oh, there we go. Alright, and again you want to double check that nothing's getting pinched on the bottom, nothing's getting pinched on the top. Then you can go ahead and reinstall the spacer onto the steer tube. Go ahead and put your stem on, get your top cap in place. For now you want to just get the top cap nice and snug. Go ahead and line everything up, and then I tend to twist this left and right many times. Push forward and back. Go ahead and snug this back down again. This is putting pressure on those two bearings. If you leave your headset loose and you ride with it long enough, you can damage your frame. So you want to be sure there's no play. So push forward and back. If you feel any play, tighten this again. Once you're sure you don't feel any play and it's not too tight, it's time to go ahead and tighten down the three upper clamp bolts. It can be very easy to forget about this little guy right here. It's a pretty important clamp bolt. Now, the lower crown bolts should be tight from the factory. I'm going to insist that you tighten these, or at least check them. So these are very tight, and then you have two more on the other side, which you're going to want to tighten down too. Now it's time to straighten out your stem. Be sure it's in a straight position. You can kind of put it right in the middle of both of these knobs on the legs, and tighten down your stem nice and tight. Then you can go ahead and position your light. Alright, now it's time to reinstall the front wheel. I found it's easiest to leave the front brake dangling. It makes it much easier to install the front wheel. So you do want to line up the dropouts. On the Fastace, the axle is not directional, so it can go either direction. Go ahead and pop it into place. And the axle bolts on the Fastace are a 19mm head. So you want to go ahead and tighten these down. And believe it or not, this fork does have 4 pinch bolts. They're hidden underneath. It's very easy to forget about the pinch bolts on the Fastace fork, but they're very important. So again, tighten them left, right, until they are nice and snug. And you want to do the same on the other side. Now it's time to reinstall your caliper. Talaria routes these on the outside, SUR RON routes them on the inside. They both seem to be fine. I get the bolts snug, then I back them out about a quarter of a turn. I center the caliper with my eyes, and I go ahead and get these nice and tight. Now one last thing before you go ride, you do want to secure your front brake hose with a zip tie. It can be very easy to forget, but if you forget, this hose can get caught in your front wheel and it can cause you to crash or ruin your brake. Tighten that zip tie like so. You go ahead and trim the excess off. And that's how you successfully install a fork on to the Talaria or the SUR RON.